want some more weed? Princeton. Yeah, we're getting off here.
Why?
Because we're gonna sweet talk Cindy Kim into finding us some weed.
No.
Well, no, you talk to her on the phone all the time.
She calls me. Then she rambles on about her East Asian Students Club or whatever. Then I have to actually pretend that I give a shit, or else she calls me a Twinkie. No.
A what?
Twinkie, yellow on the outside, white on the inside.
Lucky Twinkie, bitch. You were the one that threw our weed out the window, okay? So we're going to Princeton, and it's your responsibility to make sure Rye is shipped by the time we're eating those burgers.
Forget it. End of discussion. I am not seeing Cindy Kim.
Harold, I'm so glad you showed up.
Hey, dude, you know where I can get some green? Dude, you know where I can get some chronic? Jesus, what the hell kind of Ivy League school is this? Looking at yoga? Yes. Yes? Oh, thank Christ. Look, just give me a dime of your finest stick.
You want to see Sticky Icky, my friend?
Holy God. Oh, man. Ow. Don't touch, man. That's not cool. You can't... Ow.
Jeez. This is my baby. Here, that's 80 bucks.
80 bucks?
Yeah, 80 bucks.
Yo, this is worth 40 tops, bro.
Bro, I'm not your bro. Okay, and that's 80 bucks. You don't feel like getting high tonight? If you don't feel like getting high, that's cool with me, because there's lots of people around here. See this guy?
Hey, loser.
I smoke buds with, what's up, George? I smoke buds with George all the time. I mean,
What kind of hippie are you?
what kind of hippie am I, man? I'm a business hippie. I understand the concept of supply and demand.
Booyah. Motivation. If he knows supply and demand, so should you. We're going to continue on the worksheets, doing little notes. I've almost finished making exam 2, and there'll be a very good study guide up about it probably tomorrow by noon, Thursday afternoon latest. Like last time, that'll show you how many problems, the type of problem they are, math versus multiple choice, and where the material comes from. Exam 2 is the harder of the 3 exams. Unless some of you are really good at math. Math just makes a lot of sense to you, in which case it may actually be easier. I think it's maybe a little more predictable. And in labs today, we're just going to practice more supply and demand, but that's a place where I can be in there with you and help you individually. Yes?
We have 3 exams and 1 final.
3 exams, including the final.
3 exams.
No, it is not. Because y'all would hate me if I did.
Right.
Y'all would all do very poorly on it. We don't want that to happen. Usually the easiest, but I'm teaching topics in a different order this year, so I'm not sure. First thing we're going to do is a few notes on the board. It's going to be like the last thing we really, clickers. Go and get your clickers out. And these clickers, there's going to be several questions about supply and demand. It's quasi-introducing new material, quasi-reviewing old material. Give you an idea of how you actually use supply and demand while the projectors are warming up. This is what you often see in the industry. At least one of you will probably go off to work for a consultant at some point. And a lot of times, whenever there's a new regulation in any ag industry or any industry, but I see this a lot in the pork and the egg market, there's some new regulation, maybe restricting antibiotic use in swine production, maybe requiring egg producers to give hens more space. But you've got this thing that's going to impose costs on the industry. And the industry wants to demonstrate to government, citizens, things like this, that this is going to really impact people through higher prices. And so what they do is they hire a consulting firm that looks at the regulation and tries to project the impacts of it. They not only say, well, how much will this increase the farmer's cost of production? They want to say how much consumer prices will rise. And they'll want to say, by how many dollars are consumers hurt? And that's something they take to the public and say, look what this regulation is going to do to people. Look what it'll do to consumers. And to do that, they use supply and demand. And they make these big reports, and it's very fancy with lots of numbers, but the methods behind it are really quite simple. We're going to mimic that kind of exercise in the labs. Here's one question. You don't need to be able to see this graph as much as you might think. We have an old supply curve that's in blue, and then these red curves are different supply curves. New supply curve 1, new supply curve 2, new supply curve 3. And this is the question. That blue curve is the old supply curve. Then something happens, and that's the equation. The old supply curve of price equals 10 plus 1 times Q. Now, we have a new regulation of some sort. And what we estimate is that regulation is going to increase the cost of production by 2, meaning it costs $2 more to produce every single unit than it did before. The first unit costs $2 more. The 100 units costs $2 more. If that is the case, that $2 increase in the cost of each unit, which would be the new supply curve? That's the question. That's right. Most of you may have done it intuitively, you may have known, but it's really pretty simple. Remember that the y-axis over here is dollars. So if something costs $2 more, this curve is going to shift up $2 at every quantity. So it's a shift up $2 every quantity, so it's a parallel shift up. What we're going to be doing in the lab is take the old supply curve, we have a regulation, a new supply curve, and then we're going to project out the impact of that.
What would it mean if the micro shifted up to, but this level changes also?
That would be where the increase in cost of production for each unit was different. Like the first unit, the increase in cost was smaller than the 100 unit. Like if there was a percent change, something like that. You may not feel prepared for this, that's okay. Just do your best guess. We have an old supply curve, S, new supply curve, S prime. It shifts down, so we know we're talking about a decrease in the cost of production. So do we call that a decrease in supply or increase in supply? We haven't used those words yet, not much of it. What's your gut feeling? Increase, decrease, or neither? Let's start timing out. Across the board, the answer is increase in supply. Here's how you want to think about it. There's two ways you can think about this. One, if I tell you something costs less to produce, and then I ask you, will people produce more of it? You'll probably say yes. You think it costs less to produce, so I'm more likely to produce it. More likely to produce it sounds like increase in supply. You can also think of it like this. At any price, say a price level right here, people will produce more at the new supply curve than the old supply curve. So if the price is right here, at the old supply curve, they produce only this much, but at the new supply curve, at that same price, they produce more. And the third way to think about it, this is the way I like to think about it. If we're talking about increase in supply, decrease in supply, that sounds like quantities, right? Supply, quantities. Quantity is on the x-axis. So if we're going this way, that's towards higher Qs. That's like an increase in supply. That's something we're going to practice more of. Second question. Consumers value a product less. Demand was D, now it's D prime. Do you think that represents an increase in demand, decrease in demand, or neither? Yep, you got it. You're thinking right now. Intuitively, decrease in value, people like it less, so you may think they'll buy less of it. That sounds like decrease in demand. Or you look up here, at any price, they will now say buy less. Say at a price over here, they were purchasing this amount, but at that same price now, they're only purchasing very little, or decrease in demand. Now we have a price change. Price goes up, so the amount purchased by consumers goes down. Does that sound like an increase in demand, decrease in demand, or decrease? Did you get them all right? Did you get them all right? Congratulations. You win a thermos. Let's give them a big round of applause, everybody. That is a little tricky. Here's what you want to remember. Anytime we say increase or decrease in demand and supply, we are always talking about a shift, a movement of a curve. Here, a change in price, that's just a movement along a curve. And so we don't call those changes in demand. Specifically, we call them changes in quantity of demand, because we don't need to know that. All you need to know is this represents neither an increase nor a decrease in demand. One time I went to a meeting, it was something that the ag industry had for journalists, kind of like a conference, and what they wanted to do, they wanted to tell the journalists what animal welfare regulations would do to the ag industry. And what they wanted to do was to show those journalists how consumers would be hurt if they had to charge higher prices because their cost of production rose. And they hired consultants to do this, and consultants, came out with a number. Consumers are harmed by blah, blah, blah. And so where did they come that number from? There is a number we can get that represents the value consumers acquire from purchasing eggs, and it's something called consumer surplus. We've done producer surplus. Remember, producer surplus was like the amount of money producers make. Consumer surplus, that consumers aren't making money by buying something, but you don't buy something unless it makes it happy. Well, how happy are people? It's an imperfect measure, but you can measure that happiness in dollars, and I'm going to show you out here. In our sets of notes, we've gone through a number of things. And I'm going to show you how my notes are organized real quick so you see where we are, because we have some, I messed y'all up with section numbers at one time. But one of the first things we did, we had a section on supply. Then we had a section on demand. Then we have a section on supply and demand. Then we have a section on market equilibrium. Then we have a section on producer surplus. Then we have a section on a new market equilibrium. A new producer surplus. And a section understanding producer surplus. And those sections, those came from the notes that I've been going off of. Remember, I scanned all those notes except the stuff I'm about to put up now, and I put it on the chapter supply and demand, where you can go through there and sections and make sure you have everything. So what we want to do now, we've done a lot of producer surplus. Now we're going to do consumer surplus. Consumer surplus represents the net benefit to consumers. And I'll show you why I say net in a minute. In dollars, so this is a benefit, not happiness, but dollars, from buying in a market. Imagine you go to a market and like a farmer's market or something, and they have a lot of goods that you value. Lots of vegetables and things that you really do value, but prices are so high that you decide not to buy anything. That market doesn't give you anything. It provides no benefit to you. The goods have value, but the price is so high, you would get no net benefit from buying it, meaning the happiness you receive from the goods minus the unhappiness from paying the money would not give you a net benefit. But if the price of the farmer's market started lowering, it would get to a point where all of a sudden now I'm willing to go into buy that farmer's market and I'll buy things. Because the things there I value more than the price I'll pay for them. That difference between that value and the price you pay, that's consumer surplus. But it's not just for each unit, it's for everything you buy in a market. And to stay consistent with other notes, I'm going to go back to these retail pork supply and demand equations that we've been using so much. We're not going to solve for the equilibrium again because we've already done that, but we're going to use that equilibrium as a starting point. So we have our retail pork, where supply is marginal cost or price equals this equation. Demand, marginal value, or price equals this. Put those two equations together, and you solve for the equilibrium. You find the equilibrium price is 147.39, and the equilibrium quantity is 5217391. Remember, these are real supply and demand curves. And what we're doing is something very similar to an actual study I did when I wanted to look at how restrictions on antibiotic use in hog production would impact consumers. I'm now going to draw just a very rough graph of that supply, demand, and equilibrium. Because in that graph is where I'll show you what consumer surplus is. We have quantity on the x-axis and we have price on the y-axis. And we know our supply curve starts at 90, and our demand curve starts at 210. And we know the equilibrium price is at 147. And equilibrium quantity is at 5. So, the only other thing I'm going to add to the graph is this triangle. Remember this triangle, that lower triangle is producer surplus. This triangle is consumer surplus. All of this is just context. This is where we're starting. I'm going to explain consumer surplus in words. I'm not going to write it down because you're not responsible for knowing it. But this is, it's kind of intuitive. The stuff I'm doing, going to calculations of it, that you need to know. But it's like this. Remember when we talked about pork, how much people in South Carolina revere, we love pork, it's more important than beef. And I said, we're on this part of the demand curve. We value it much higher than people in Oklahoma. People in Oklahoma also value pork, but they value it less. So they're down here on the demand curve. We value it a lot. You value it less. But we don't pay a higher price than you in the pork market. We pay the same price you do for pork, but we value it more, so we get net benefits from the pork. And we value it way up here, we pay this price. The difference between the value and the price we pay is our welfare, our happiness we get from pork. You value it down here, and you also pay that price. So you get a smaller net benefit from buying that pork. And when you do this and you sum this over all people, you take the value they place on the pork minus the price they pay, you sum it over all people. What you find is that net benefit for everybody who buys pork in the whole United States is that triangle. Value minus price for me, value minus price for you, value minus price for some other person. For all quantities consumed, and we consume from 0 to 5.2 million. That intuitive is why consumer surplus represents the value people get from being able to buy pork in the pork market. So if we want to know how consumers are hurt or benefited from something, all we need to do is see how that little triangle changes. And it's a right triangle, so the calculations are very, very simple. If I want to calculate this consumer surplus, jump off the cost of it. We know it's a little right triangle, so the area of that right triangle is 1/2 times the base times the height. So I'm going to go 1/2. You can look at this triangle a lot of different ways. What I tend to do, I like to take this triangle and I kind of feel like I just tip it on its side, where 210 minus 147.39 is the base. And the base for me is the difference from here to here of that triangle. So this triangle, the base is from here to here, and the height is from here to here. Well, the base, from the length of the segment from here to here is just 210 minus 147.39. Again, the length of the segment from here to here is 0 to 5.2 million. That's it. That's why we study geometry. When you do this, you may remember that the units we were talking about, the quantity, was 100 weight of pork per month, and so when you look at the value of everything consumed, solid pork consumed per month. That consumer surplus, that's the value people get, 163 million, for being able to buy pork. Everybody in the United States, per month. One other place I used a calculation like this, I study farm animal welfare. And part of what our research has to do with debates about regular diets versus vegan diets and things like that. And often when you see people promoting a vegan diet, what they do is they point out things like, well, you know, an animal won't suffer except for the mice that get caught in the combine and things like that. You know that, well, we don't know, there's some studies that show that carbon footprint could be lower in a vegan diet. Some reasons suggest for some people might be a healthier diet. And I'm not saying what it is or isn't. But generally what they do is they tend to ignore the fact that people like meat. When they talk about whether you should have this diet or that diet, they often tend to overlook that we really like meat. I mean, it tastes very good. It's better than broccoli. And at some point, we'll want to actually put into numbers just how much people really like meat, all different types of meat. So we did consumer surplus for things like beef and pork and chicken and all this other stuff. And what that represented was just the value that we placed on eating animals. And it was, of course, a very big number, and that was the whole point. So when you promote a vegan diet, even if you think there's some like environmental reasons or something, you can't overlook the fact that, well, it's humans that we care about, and they like this stuff. Take it away from them, they get very mad. So to put this in perspective, if suddenly pork was banned, by how much would consumers be hurt? Well, what's the value of all that pork you take away? The answer is what we just calculated. It would be hurt by 163, 4, 2, 5. So that's a intuitive interpretation. And if you take the value of that, of all the meats and eggs and dairy we consume, and you compare it to the value we place on fruits and vegetables and grains just don't compare to meat and dairy and eggs. It's just really like stuff made from animals. In the lab, what we're going to do is I'm going to have you do some calculations of the supply and demand. We're going to have an increase in cost of producing pork. We're going to have a new supply curve. We're going to calculate the new consumer surplus to show you the kind of things that consultants do on a regular basis. Now back to our worksheets. That's the end of the notes. Now we're going to our worksheets. And I'd like you to go to number 13. Number 13 on our supply and demand worksheets, which was 49 under the more disorganized worksheets. It's a question we skipped over in last class. For number 13, you've already got a supply curve drawn in. And that supply curve comes from number 11. Number 11, I give you a formula for a supply curve, and in the graph below, you trace out that supply curve. And number 13, that's where we're going to have a change in the cost of production. And what it says is that suppose that the price of oil, natural gas, and fossil fuels in general rise. Because natural gas is used to produce the nitrogen fertilizer which grows the corn and soybeans, which feeds the hogs that produce the pork, the marginal cost of producing pork rises $25 per hundredweight at all levels of production. Graph this new supply curve in the graph below. Pork does come from fossil fuels and mining. Fertilizer comes from the ground. Fertilizer makes corn makes hogs makes everything very, very happy. You've already got this supply curve starting at an intercept of 100. And you've seen this before. You saw it in the clickers. I'm coming here and I'm telling you now it costs $25 more to produce every 100 pounds of retail pork. The first 100 pounds, the second 100 pounds, the 5 millionth 100 pounds. What does the new supply curve look like? That's just, you take the supply curve and you shift it up by $25 so the new intercept is 125. So to trace out your new supply curve, you can just start by doing a dot where the new intercept is at 125. Got approximated it a little. And then you don't have to worry about really plotting at every point because you know if at every point it shifts up by the same amount, this new line is going to be a parallel line. And so you can just eyeball it and draw something that looks parallel. And that's your new supply curve. If I ever give you a supply curve and then make you shift it by a precise amount using math, it's always going to be a parallel shift. I'm not going to say something like hog production costs increased by 25%. It's always going to be an easy little shift. Is that good for 13? Yes, sir.
Well, there is a question where, how would you ask the question to change the slope? Like, if the intercept is the same, but the slope actually changed?
That could come about 5%. If I just said hog production costs increased by 2%, then the intercept would stay the same and the slope would increase. Now let's go to number 19. Now we've got some really, really easy supply and demand curves. Look at them, they're very simple. If I'm going to grade you on a test, if I have you graph supply and demand, you wouldn't want me to use those big complicated equations, right? Because how would I know what you're exactly right? You probably want the simple supply and demand curves. When I ask you to trace supply and demand and draw on a graph on the test, this is the kind of thing it's going to look like. Very easy numbers, whole numbers, we don't have to worry about decimals, where we can just immediately look at this and know whether it's right or wrong. What I want you to do now is trace out those supply and demand curves. So number 19 on the worksheets, supply price equals P plus P plus Q. Trace out the supply and trace out the demand curve. After you traced out the curves, then now you know the market equilibrium is where the two curves cross. And show me the equilibrium prices. And always remember, when you draw a supply and demand curve, label supply curve S. Label the demand curve T. And just remind you to do that. And we always, the intersection of two lines is our equilibrium. You come across to the equilibrium price, and you tell me that the equilibrium price P is equal to P. You tell me this is the equilibrium quantity Q. your equilibrium quantity? Six. If you trace those curves out right, the equilibrium quantity is 6. 6. If you didn't get that, if you got something different, then what you want to do is let's work on it in lab. Let me look at what you did and we'll figure out what went wrong. What's your equilibrium price? 14. Now notice it has more to this question. It asks you for the producer surplus and the consumer surplus. Producer surplus is that lower right triangle. Consumer surplus is the upper right triangle. First, why don't you see if you can calculate the consumer surplus real quick. Use the exact same way we did before. Same triangle with just some different numbers. Guess how I do it? Actually, I'll do consumer surplus first, all right? Okay. I come over here, I look at this triangle. Right triangle area is 1/2 base times height. For me, I like to call this the base, from here to here. 14 to 20, that's 6. What I'm doing is I'm taking 20 minus 14. That's the length of that segment. The height from here to here is from the origin of 0 to the quantity of 6. Which is 6. Give us 18. Now see if you can do producer surplus real quick. Producer surplus. Oh, thank you. We're talking about per unit. So this is the total amount of happiness people get from buying a certain amount of pork. And that's quantity, look on the graph, per what? Look on the x-axis of the graph. Per month. And so the consumer surplus will be $18, and it is dollars per month. Producer surplus is this little triangle here. That's going to be 1/2 times base times height. For me, the base is from 2 to 14 there. That makes us 14 minus 2. Again, the height is going to be exactly the same. We're going from here to here, the same segment, 0 to 6. And so this is 6. And our producer surplus is going to be $36 per month. know what we're all thinking. We've got a few minutes left. There's no point in going to a different topic. We've got this guy who shows up every class with a muscle shirt on. It's like he's looking at me and saying, "Baby, if you want to arm wrestle, I'll arm wrestle we need someone to call it. Let's do one with arm.
3, 2, 1, go.